Staying with us, the program is this morning on ITV. It's now time for us to look at ways at generating more revenue for the country. The country at the moment may be enjoying some good revenue from oil, but the subsidy regime appears to be clearing so many of those revenue that ought to be going to the federal, state and local government, while some are still harping on the need for full deregulation. Others are saying that the masses would bear the brunt should the nation actually fully deregulate the oil sector. But away from still within that range here, some people are still talking on the need for local governments, state governments to go all out to carry out intensive revenue drive to ensure they raise more money via tax and others, and ensure. But in another aspect, some are saying the political actors are afraid of election. They don't want to step on the toes of the people or the very rich, and everyone is just being careful. Now let's look at that. We've been joined by Mr. Frederick Bridges, a public relations and event management consultant, and he is the chairman CEO of the Alfond Conference Limited, publisher of the Revenue magazine. Welcome to our studio, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all viewers.
Let's get some worry here. We're getting worried, and we're getting more worried as the day go by here. The issue is that the revenue appears to be dwindling, and it appears the state, the federal government, appear to be drowning in a state of financial lessness, as someone puts it here. What's really going on?
If you look at what is going on in Nigeria today, in terms of internally generated revenue, I would say, based on the work that we have done in the past 2 years, I would say that there is a heightened awareness today. The awareness today amongst the 36
Are you speaking nationally, or are you speaking for some key states like Lagos and others who are doing their job, or in some areas where nobody even go out for it?
I want to speak generally for all the 36 states and the FCT.
Okay.
And what we have observed, because we have done some work in the last 2 years on internally generated revenue amongst Nigerian states, what we have observed is that there is a heightened interest as far as IGR in the 36 states and the FCT is concerned. For a long time, the conversation in the public space out there is that Lagos State is successful in internally generated revenue, and the remaining of the states in the country are just basically docile. But the facts on the ground are more exciting than that. Based on what we have done, like I said, in the last 2 years, there are several states that are not doing badly at all. Let us look at Nigeria zone by zone. Let's beam our searchlight first on the South-South zone. The South-South zone is privileged when it comes to federal account allocations on a monthly basis because of the constitutional 13% derivation that goes to the oil-producing states, which make up the bulk of the South-South states. That is Rivers, Delta, Akwa Ibom, and Bayelsa. Those 4 states take a lot of funds from the federal government on a monthly basis, and several of them are able to deploy that to also strengthen their internally generated revenue. Rivers State stands out in this area. So if you say internally generated revenue is happening in Lagos and is happening well, it is also happening in Rivers State. Let me give you some quick stats. In 2020, in spite of the COVID-19 and the NSAS, the results that came out from Lagos was an uptick. Lagos actually increased.
Lagos just leave Lagos, the country on its own.
No problem. No problem.
We argue that financially, Lagos is the country on its own.
No problem. But the story of Lagos is very interesting.
Good.
Because even as far back as early this year, the chairman of the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service granted an interview to the media saying that Lagos State has about 600 billion in lost revenue from tax evasion.
Despite what they make.
In spite of what they make. This is a state that already makes 400 billion naira. This is a state that made 400 billion naira in internally generated revenue in 2020. And it says that the state actually missed out on another 600 billion. So give or take, you are saying that potentially
40% is what they are making.
Yes. So you are saying that potentially Lagos State can do 1 trillion. Now, when you look at that, Lagos State, of course, is the most sophisticated economy. If you look at Nigeria as comprising of 37 economies, Lagos is the most sophisticated of these 37 economies. Now, if you look at Lagos State, and Lagos State says more than 60% of what I can potentially collect is not available for me to collect because people evade it. How much more other states?
Okay, I'll cut you here very quickly. We'll take a commercial break now. When we come back, Mr. Frederick Akpeji will be with me. We'll be looking at the need to boost IGR across the country after this break.
Independent Radio. 89.7 FM.
Talking drums and shakira combination.
89.7 FM. Independent Radio Abuja. Get it locked.
And did I ever tell you about its price? It's economic and that's really nice. Good price, more smiles. That means more smiles. Good price, more smiles.
Dermatologically tested Bevan Baby Diapers makes babies happy with elastic side bands, breathable external layers, barrier to help prevent leakage, and makes families happy with its affordable price.
Okay, thanks indeed for staying with us here. We're still having with us in the studio Mr. Frederick Akpeji, Public Relations and Event Management Consultant. He's talking purely finance this morning. So you're giving us the analysis of Lagos before we went on the break.
Yes, very good. I was talking about Lagos. Lagos is doing very well. Everybody knows the story. But my point is there are other states in Nigeria that have also woken up as far as IGR is concerned. If you beam the searchlight on the South zone, for instance, River State stands out. Now you ask yourself, why is it that it's only River State that stands out in the South zone? Because 4 of those states, Rivers, Delta, Akwa Ibom, and Bayelsa respectively, they get huge chunks of funds, courtesy the 30% derivation. How come it is only River State that is able to maybe perhaps deploy this fund creatively and use it to strengthen their capacity to generate revenue internally? We can discount Bayelsa and say Bayelsa is a small state. But hey.
But with a small state and a bigger revenue,
yes.
When are they going to do more?
Okay, I'm going somewhere. But for Delta State and Akwa Ibom State, I expect actually a performance that is almost as good as what River State does. That's for South. That's for South. Edo State and Cross River, maybe perhaps they are the cousins in the South that do not really benefit.
Babies in the oil block. Babies in the oil block.
Yes, I mean the fortunes that go to the other 4 states, they don't come to Edo and they don't come to Cross River State. But Edo is trying and all of that. But let's move away from that zone. Let us move to the Southwest zone. Now, the Southwest zone is an entirely a Lagos affair. Ogun State, in the last 3 years, even though previous to those 3 years, had been showing significant improvement in IGR, Ogun State seems to be slowing down.
Okay.
And then for the other states, Oyo, Osun, Ekiti, and Ondo, those ones basically, compared to Lagos, it's as if they've not even started at all. That's the picture in the Southwest. Now let's come to the Southeast, and then finally I'll come to the zones of the North. In the Southeast, you see a scenario that maybe is troubling, because we know that, I mean, the people that make up the Southeast economically, they're very dynamic. It's a very successful zone. But the business and the industrial and the entrepreneurial success of the Southeast zone is not reflected as far as internally generated revenue in those states are concerned. They are not.
You mean the likes of Anambra,
Enugu,
market,
yes,
the Aba market, Abia, Area,
yes,
and others are not reflected.
It is not a reflection of the size of the Southeast, economically speaking. What we see in terms of internally generated revenue in the Southeast zone, I believe, does not compare to the capacity, the economic capacity, industrial capacity, entrepreneurial capacity of that zone. Now, Anambra State and Enugu State, give or take, between both of them, usually are the top states. But what they generate in internally revenue is not significant at all. Let me just
compared to Rivers, go ahead.
Compared to the likes of Rivers. Okay. Let me just pop up some figures for you to see.
Good.
In 2020, Rivers State generated 117 billion naira in internally generated revenue. That is a higher figure than the 5 states of the southeast zone generated in 2020. I put a question mark on that. Are you telling me that the size of the economy of Rivers State is as big as the size of the economy of the entire southeast zone combined? No, it can't possibly be. So you can see, we can look at it on a negative sense as a performance that is not too great, but we can also look at it from a positive sense and say, hey, there is a huge potential. States like Anambra State, states like Enugu State, states like Abia State should be able to do close to 100 billion annually in internally generated revenue. But what do we find? In 2020, Anambra State did 28 billion, and that was the best performance in the zone. Now let's come up north.
Anambra, why is 28?
Because Anambra State...
What about Arialia?
Well, I will imagine that, just like I explained earlier on, that the capacity to generate IGR in the southeast zone, I don't think it has
Why
scratched
are they not generating? What's the problem?
I don't know.
Is it the fear of the traders, the fear of the people, the tax guys are pocketing the money, or what?
I don't know.
No, you must know.
You
are very vast in it. From what you're saying now, you look extremely very vast.
Yes.
So you must, you have followed the taxes, the revenue. Why is it that, from the analysis you are giving us, real very in-depth here, why is Lagos Rivers dancing well on the stage, and others who have bigger markets that should dance more are not dancing well?
I think it has to do with apathy. Because I have not, honestly, in the last 2 years, I have been studying this subject of IGR among the states.
Is it apathy or political will to drive for revenue?
I don't know, but because if you look at Lagos has, I mean, in terms of taxation in Lagos today, you can say there are very institutionalized structures on ground. Correct. People are a lot more aware, whether they are companies or they are individuals. Yes, but I think that there is a resistance, maybe a subtle resistance, maybe a cultural resistance,
or maybe those who are in their hem of affairs are not trusted. That should we pay tax?
We don't know what the monies will be deployed to do. But hey, I mean, Anambra State just built an airport from the scratch in less than 1 year, and it was tax money that was used to build it. It didn't borrow. The state governor boasted on the day of commissioning the airport that I did not borrow 1 kobo to do this project, so it came from tax revenue. So I don't think it is too much of not seeing what the monies are being deployed for, but rather I think there is a general apathy in the southeast zone towards paying taxes. I think so. The state revenue agencies in that zone of the country need to put on their thinking
cap not better
and investigate it a lot more.
But let's check the north.
Now let's come back to the north.
Okay.
In the north, for instance, you will see some trends. Kano and Kaduna are the biggest economic states in the north, economically speaking. But the exciting story today is FCT. For a long time, revenue was being collected for FCT by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Yeah. But 3 years ago, the Federal Inland Revenue Service gave an independence to the FCT. So the FCT started its own revenue service. In the last 3 years, we've seen a tremendous performance in FCT in terms of internally generated revenue, which gets me thinking, why is FCT generating so much in internally generated revenue compared to the big states we know in the north, like Kano and Kaduna?
What's Kano? What can you give us the figure for
Kano? In 2020, for instance, FCT did 92 billion. Okay. Kaduna, which came number 5, did 50 billion. Kano, which came number 8, did 31 billion.
Kano do 31 billion?
Now, in the last 3 years...
Why should Kano do 31 billion?
I am speaking with figures.
I know, I agree with you. I'm not disputing your figures.
In the last...
But you should be worried that the most populous state in the country... I know Kano and Lagos are contending for which one is more populous. How could Kano do 31 billion? The hub of
commerce.
The northern stretch of the sub-Saharan Africa.
I agree with you. But again, maybe perhaps there are weak structures. In trying to explain this, let me share with you some things we have observed. Because in last year, for instance, we undertook a roadshow to visit the internal revenue service of 18 states that cut across the 6 zones of the country.
And FCT.
And FCT, yes. And I met on this roadshow, I met some of the chief executives, some of the executive chairpersons of these revenue agencies. I met them one-on-one, listened to them, made presentations to them, and so on and so forth. Okay. Some of the observations that I have made so far point to states that have put in place an independent internally generated internal revenue service are tending to do very well. States that don't have that are doing very wretchedly. They are doing very poorly.
With some task forces.
Yes. If you look at Kaduna State, for instance, Kaduna State enjoys that level of independence. If you also look at a state in the north, surprisingly, Borno State, you would think that with the insurgency in the north, especially in the southeast.
Borno generated what?
Borno State may not have been generating a lot, but it is growing very rapidly. It's growing very rapidly. In 2008, it did about 8 billion. In 2011, it did about, in 2009, sorry, it did about 11 billion. And in 2020, it did about 15 billion. It is not doing badly at all. Another state in the north that will surprise you is Zamfara. In fact, we built our stage light further. We looked at the segment of taxation that has to do with direct assessment. You know, the personal income tax is the one that is easy to collect.
Correct.
And it is mainly from people that work in the private and public sectors, the organized private and public sectors.
That one they must pay.
Yes, that one, I mean, it is deducted directly from your salary. So that one is pretty easy to collect. But direct assessment mainly has to do with the informal sector. As far as the percentage of direct assessment tax to total taxation, Zamfara State is number 1. Ahead of Lagos, ahead of Ogun, ahead of Rivers, ahead of the FCT. Number 1. Very exciting story. You know, so that's why I say, generally speaking, there is an uptick in terms of awareness about IGR in the country as a whole.
But now, let's now come here. I look at the local governments. Are they doing enough?
I think the local governments, as far as internally generated revenue is concerned in Nigeria today, they are part of the structure of the states. They do not have an independent revenue generating services. Of course, whatever it is they are generating, it is still within the confines of the internal revenue service of their respective states. Now, as local governments, of course, taxation is collected from all of the citizens of the country who exist in all the local councils. But I think some of the states are doing very well. Some of the states need to buckle up. Like I said earlier, it is very important to get the state government to support their internal revenue services. Support in terms of give them independence. Some of the states in Nigeria today, I mean, Lagos has been independent. The Lagos Internal Revenue Service has been independent as far back as 2006. In other words, far over a decade ago.
So during the Tinubu era?
Yes, during the Tinubu era, basically. Of course, you know some of the engineering that the pioneer governor in this new dispensation in Lagos State, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You remember some of the measures they put in place. I think the subsequent governors, they have capitalized on that, they have built on that, and they've done a wonderful job in Lagos. But I'm saying that one of the key things that we have observed is states whose internal revenue services have some level of independence. They can operate on their own. They can hire quality staff. They can put in systems. They can deploy technology, invest in technology to reduce, to block leakages and all of that. Those states are tending to do very healthy when it comes to internal revenue service. And then also, in terms of tenure of office, from September last year till today, the executive chairpersons of 5 revenue agencies in the states have gone and they have been replaced. You need some level of stability in a set, for the agencies that are so critical to driving the revenue of the states. I think going forward, this is a message for the state governors and then the state legislatures to look inwards and say, hey, we want to make the appointment of the executive chairman of the Internal Revenue Service of our state a 10-year appointment. We're going to guarantee that as soon as you are appointed for a 4-year tenure, that's it. Except maybe the roof comes crashing down, you're going to retain that position so that it can be stable and plan on a long term and all of that. But the situation where you find somebody is appointed to chair the revenue service of a state, within a year or two, another person comes up, but it's not stable enough. Even in the Nigerian system, what do we have? 4 years for the president, 4 years for the governor, and then a renewal for another 4 years. You know, I think states that are adhering to this.
What about if the president is not performing?
It's like saying, what about if the president is not performing? We still have to wait until the next 4 years to renew his appointment.
There are clauses to remove him.
But there are I mean, we are all Nigerians. We know the kind of country we have. We
difficult, but because of the Inland Revenue Board,
we know the share. We know
it
the
just may not be accepted as the president.
I know. I agree with you. I agree with you.
What is it for me?
I don't think getting.
These 36 states, there are maybe some you observe. You don't mention it here. They are not performing. That if you have your way, you sack them.
I agree with you. But honestly, what are we talking about? There is no shortage of qualified personnel in Nigeria. There are thousands of persons that are out there in each of the states that will head the internal revenue.
Let's look at the problem of non-remittance. It's an issue that many are raising here. The NPA is in the spotlight, although the probe appears to be going on the ground. We're going to see where the final report will be submitted. We've seen issues of talk of non-remittance, some fingers pointing to the NNPC, some points to the Nigerian custom. How do we deal with non-remittance at the time when we say our revenues already dwindling?
You know, everything boils down to the political will. I've mentioned the excitement of Lagos. Anybody that talks about internally generated revenue will talk excitingly about Lagos because there are institutions in place.
But somebody said don't compare anybody with Lagos.
Yes.
For somewhere.
So why can't the people that are driving IGR in Lagos, they are not Frenchmen, they are not Germans, they are not Italians, they are not Chinese, they are not Americans. They are Nigerians like us. In fact, while I visited the Lagos Internal Revenue Service last year, to my surprise, some of the top officials are not from Lagos State. They are hired from different parts of the country. In other words, what does it point at? It points at a revenue agency that is looking for competence.
Above ethnicity, tribalism,
above
and statism.
That, hey, we may be a Yoruba state, but hey, we are not looking to employ only Yoruba people. If you are talented, if you can help us drive our IGR in Lagos, come on board. I mean, that's the only conclusion you get to. I mean, internally generated revenue in Nigeria today is so key. Let me give you a little thing, maybe a little hint. 2019, when the new crop of governors came on board, you know, I mean, usually the presidency will host all the governors, you know, in a ceremonial way to welcome them and all of that. The vice president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, hosted all of the governors. And one of the things he told them, he says, look, we are not getting as much revenues shared among states as we used to. Every state must put on their thinking cap and look inwards and see what they can do. And he referred to two things. He said in the First Republic, the economies of the three regions were built on two things: revenue from agriculture and revenue from taxation.
Even the refineries.
Oil was just coming, I mean, in the First Republic, oil was just beginning.
Yeah.
Oil had not become the star.
I mean, the refineries later were also
yes.
From all of this.
You know, and all of that. So if you take a look at all of this, you can see that, hey, some of the states are getting it right, but I think many more states can get it right. And as for the federal agency, in terms of non-remittance of revenues collected, I said it has to do with political will. You know, a lot of things that happen in Nigeria, we think it is rocket science. No, it is not rocket science. Because in this same Nigeria, there are some other persons that get it right. If you talk about federal MDAs, you see all kinds of ills and weaknesses in the way several federal MDAs are running. But you also see some federal MDAs
hiring from all cylinders.
From all cylinders. You take a look at an agency like NCC. People coming to Nigeria from all over the country to come and benchmark what NCC has done. There is also an agency, Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. If you look at their figures, they have delivered the number of housing, the number of mortgages that they have delivered to beneficiaries in Nigeria today.
Many accusing them of not doing that, not carrying enough advocacy for Nigerians to buy into the mortgage ideology.
It's far more than what the country achieved in several years before. And the new administration
need to actually go into advocacy so that Nigeria will have a mortgage culture. We can be doing some, but even the mortgage culture, everyone wants to go and mold a block, put blocks down, get to lintel, roof, and take 6 years to plaster when you can easily pay and pay instrumentally over time. Over
10 years, over 20 years. I agree. You know, but the simple point I'm making, I'm just using Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria as an example of a federal MDA that is doing well. A new administration came on board there in 2017. If you go and check the records, you will be amazed. That's just an example. I've cited NCC, I've cited Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. There are several other MDAs like that are doing fantastic. I mean, in your words, firing from all cylinders. So when we complain at times and say some agencies are not doing well, let's simply insist How come Mr. A is doing it right? How come you're not doing us right?
Something like our parents then.
Yes, we frown at it.
When someone took first in your class, you ask how many heads. How much school fees
You don't have.
that
And all of that.
School fees are the same one head. And yet that child is taking first.
And all of that. And all of that. But to put all of these things in perspective, at least from our own point of view, we actually have an annual recognition program for the Nigerian states and the FCT.
To
In terms of IGR, yes, that we call the Nigerian States IGR Awards. We've done it last year, we're doing it again this year. And that's basically to encourage the culture of excellence, the culture of better performance among the states.
Let's look at touting now. I don't know, from the way you sound, you are a heavily traveled man within the Nigerian space here. Are you not worried about revenue touting? Almost everywhere you go, you find these boys with tires on the road, everything.
The incidence of using touts to collect revenue is reducing.
But you still see them on the road.
You talked about advocacy. You know, at times, the perception that has been in the minds of people will remain for a long time, and it takes a long time to change. Revenue collection in Nigeria is associated with touts. I mean, the boys that will just waylay you, you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know whether the receipts they are giving you are fake receipts, are receipts that at the end of the day they will just tear up and throw it in the dustbin and put the monies in their pocket. You are not quite sure. That culture has been drastically addressed in several of the states, whether it is Edo State, whether it is Lagos State, whether it is Kaduna State, whether it is Kogi State, whether it is Nasarawa State. That culture has been reduced to the barest minimum. But again, advocacy should then come in to make this perception, I mean, to change this old perception.
No, as our time flies quickly, let's look at the issue of exploiting opportunities by virtue of proximity. Many have complained, like what you have also observed in Ogun State, that Nasarawa State and Niger State are not tapping into the potentials that the FCT brings, the same as what Lagos brings to Oyo and Ogun State. Do you agree with this line of accusation?
I agree with you perfectly. And it is actually not a bad thing at all. In fact, it's a good thing. Because if you look at
Nasarawa is the Ogun of FCT.
Yes, in fact, Nasarawa is the Ogun of FCT. More than even Kaduna or more than even Niger State. In fact, I think the closest parallel to the Lagos Ogun is actually the FCT Nasarawa. Because, I mean, you drive across from Abuja all the way down to Kefi. Today, it's almost like the two states have come together
fully.
You know, so that example also subsists with Nasarawa State and FCT. I met with the chairman of Nasarawa State Internal Revenue Service last year, and one of the things he told me was very instructive. That look, we are helping the people that live in Nasarawa State to know that they are taxpayers in Nasarawa State and not in the FCT.
Okay,
so I believe that this
are watching us here. You pay tax where you live and not where you work.
Yes, that's basically it.
Okay, please, if we have the papers now, let me just take one or two quickly before we come back to wrap up the interview segment with Mr. Frederick Akpeji. Very vast in taxation and the need for us to push IGR upward. Okay, so quickly before we let you go, let's get your final words on improving taxation and IGR across the country.
Very good. I want to focus again on the states. First thing, appoint a revenue chief and give him a tenured appointment.
Competence.
Give him 4 years and then renew the 4 years for a second tenure.
If he performs well.
If he performs well. Okay. And of course, like I said earlier, there are so many persons that are competent that you can pick out in any of the given states. That's one. Number two, give those state revenue services a level of independence. Give them 5%, for instance. Approve 5% for them, 10% for them, 15% for them. These are some of the figures that I've seen based on our visits to these various states. Some states have as high as 15, some states have as high as 5. Whatever it's going to work for your state, please put something in place so that such an agency are able to behave more or less like a private sector agency. And it brings efficiencies to the table, it brings high performance to the table, and so on and so forth. And then 3, deploy technology as much as you can. I mean, today, nobody goes to stand in the bank and wait for hours and hours to collect 10,000 naira. You just simply use your ATM card.
Or even do transfer.
Or even do transfer, you know. So the technology is available. It's not a strange thing that we're going to bring from Europe first of all to come and deploy. It's there. You know, and all of that.
Okay, so we hope that the actors involved are listening here. You have no reason to go out lamenting and coming to do what some said the cap in hand type of begging you do every month here, a FAC meeting.
Yeah.
As a cap in hand. They keep coming here and the commissioners come and they beg and you struggle for money when you can generate money in your own state. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for having me on the seat.
It's a very time, I must confess, you're very vast in taxation, you're vast in IGR, and you appear as if you're monitoring the state. If I am president, I'll put you the monitor. I'll check all of them around and let's see what they do. Don't come to Abuja and ask me to go and share foreign reserve or external reserve or external account. Hey guys, follow him and let him tell you how to run your things. God knows.
Thank you very much.
You have a resource person here you could use and just pay him a little, and he's willing to offer his service. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Have a wonderful day.
On that note, we end this morning on ITV. We thank you for investing your time and moment with us. We are indeed very hopeful and very certain that all would be going on very well across the country. On behalf of my producer, Al Hassan Bala, those behind the console, and my co-presenter, Osalame Pisugbe, and the moment and staff, we say goodbye. Have a lovely, fulfilling, wonderful, super working week ahead. Goodbye.